Hello everybody, I'm Andy, and welcome back to another video game retrospective. My last couple of videos, I've covered some more meaningful games. You know, forgotten gems, classics from my childhood, but today, we're doing something a little different. We're doing something weird. This video, I'm gonna get back into doing what me and my viewers love most. Weird, forgotten old games that might be hidden cult classics, but are probably just terrible. Hey, it's a fun gamble. This particular game I've had in the works for a surprisingly long amount of time. The first time I laid eyes on this game, I just knew I'd have to cover it eventually. And here we are. So with that out of the way, we gotta talk about Redline. More accurately, Redline Gang Warfare 2066. Yeah, that title doesn't quite roll off the tongue, does it? This game came out all the way back in 1999. It was a first-person shooter, car combat hybrid. Yeah, there definitely weren't a lot of those. And before I can even begin, I have to talk about the menu. Yeah, I don't know if this is coming through on the video, but look how choppy this is. This can't be more than 3 FPS. I have no idea why this is happening. So Night Dive Studio is the current publisher behind Redline. And by publisher, I mean they're the guys who found it in a storage locker or probably the bottom of a trash can, and they're now the ones who are distributing it on Steam. For some Night Dive games, they'll actually go through, do a full remaster, make the game work on modern hardware, that type of stuff. But then there's plenty of games that they'll just throw onto Steam, and fingers crossed it works on modern OSs. And I'm shocked Redline is even playable. With games around this era, it's always a dice roll to see what you're gonna get. I was half expecting this game to not even run the first time I saw it. But with Redline, we only get frame rate issues. At least I can load the game. Anyway, this is me talking about a lot of minutia that you guys usually don't see in the videos, but just know all the hoops that I had to go through to get this game working. I had to use a custom FOV and widescreen mod, which I'll talk about later. But don't think I'm done talking about this game's frame rate. I'm gonna get into it in a little bit. Yeah. Enough talk. Let's actually get into this game.
Alright, that was those two guys who lived behind the gas station with Redline This. Sure to be a #1 hit here in Stadium City, since nobody else has any instruments. Yeah. Shots fired. Those aren't company rigs. They're Red Sixers, and they've entered the studio building. If you're within the sound of my voice, get in your cars. The city is under attack. Arm yourselves. Oh, God! Oh, my God! They're here!
Ladies and gentlemen of Stadium City, my name is Rant of the Red Sixers. We have assumed control. We'll be going door to door, collecting citizens and eating them. Anybody has a problem with this, they can discuss it with me here at the radio station. We're gonna listen to some of my music now. Anybody has a problem with that, they can take it up with me here at the radio station. Kumbaya, my lord. Kumbaya. Kumbaya, my lord. Kumbaya. I don't like that no more. I do this.
Wow. I don't quite recall where I found it, but I do remember an interview with a developer where he said that the very first 30 seconds of your video game were the most important. And yeah, I think Redline knows that philosophy well. Already, we have bad guys straight out of Mad Max, you have some guy shouting over a megaphone talking about rounding people up and eating them, while also singing Kumbaya. Yep, this is how you start a game. Oh man, that music. Once again, I'll talk about it in a little bit. Don't worry, there's a lot to talk about with this game. Alright, here's the driving gameplay. It's a video game. The biggest selling point behind this game was the seamless transition from a first-person shooter to a car combat game. You can hop right into your car and the game immediately turns into a driving game. This is pretty seamless. I must admit, especially for 99, this would have been pretty impressive. Don't get me wrong, plenty of games had separate vehicle and on-foot gameplay sections for a long time. That had been a thing well before Redline. But I never remembered a game being this smooth. Oftentimes it'd be separated between different levels. Here, you can just quite literally hop into vehicles. It's there, it's working. So for a developer as small as the one that made Redline, this is pretty impressive. Unfortunately, the driving controls are very wonky, bordering on bad. I'm not entirely sure whether or not that's due to the game's age, compatibility problems, or just the fact that I'm not supposed to be playing this on a keyboard. I kind of feel like a joystick or a proper controller would have worked a lot better, but again, this is switching between first-person shooting and vehicle driving. One control style is going to suffer either way, it's inevitable. You know, a funny comparison would be the GTA games on PC. And for that, I gotta ask, what is the go-to accepted control setup for those games? Because when I was playing Vice City a while back, I was literally swapping between controller and mouse and keyboard, depending on whether or not I was in a car or moving on foot. That was a pretty clunky solution, to be fair, but I still don't know which one is the preferred method. So internet, tell me, is it better to have a controller for racing games that you also use for on-foot gameplay, or is it better to have a mouse and keyboard for on-foot shooting as well as for driving sections? Or is it better just to swap between them? Please let me know, I'm still unsure myself. But yeah, the controls in Redline are a product of their time in more ways than one. They are horribly dated. Have fun trying to do a handbrake turn and watching your car spin around like you're skidding on ice. The combat itself isn't too bad, but by no means does it hold up. It has a bit of depth, way more than I was expecting. You have multiple weapons to switch from, as well as shields for your car. You can also adjust your aim, which can be a little finicky because again, you're having to press keyboard keys just to do it. However, if you put both your hands on the keyboard, it's not too bad. You can also place down mines, and you have side guns. You can drive around and take potshots at enemies who happen to be at the side of your car. While I've gotten plenty of kills with the mines, I don't think I've done a shred of damage to anyone else with these side guns. It is so hard to aim, I have no idea if I'm hitting anybody. You have to use your radar constantly just to see if you're pointing in the right direction. It's a mess. But in the game's defense, and I think it kind of knows this, health and ammo are very abundant. I've never ran out of ammo in a single mission. Even still, it was a nightmare trying to get a hang of the controls, especially with the AI. Okay, so you have location-based damage on your vehicles, and as far as I can tell, the AI does too. This is pretty simple. You just got separate armor for different sides of your car, the front, the sides, and the back. If someone's shooting you from one side, they'll hit that side of the car, taking away your shields, and eventually your armor's gonna break. And as far as I can tell, that side of your car is basically screwed. Just a few shots or a single rocket hit from that side will blow you up. That part made sense. What doesn't make sense is how you're supposed to kill enemies with this method. You see, enemies are constantly speeding around you, outmaneuvering you, and they're always making sure to never let you get behind them. They turn and face you so fast that you're better off just laying mines for them and hoping that they run into them. Many times I've just used myself as bait, driving circles around them, dropping all of my mines, trying to blow them up. It is very finicky, you guys. I'm not joking. The car combat, it's just bad, you guys. I'm actually shocked that I managed to get through a lot of these levels. Looking back, if I had to do it a second time, I don't know if I'd make it through it. Alright, I'll talk more about on-foot gameplay in just a sec, but we gotta get back to our story. I'm putting story in quotes. Alright, this big guy was yelling over the megaphone earlier. I'm thinking he's the first boss. But, well, I'd try and explain what happens, but I think you guys just need to see for yourself.
My dad could shoot. Lost my appetite. Later days, asshole.
Anyways. Hey, some guy was watching me the whole time.
Hey there, buddy. My name's Bork. Company sent me. Looks like you took care of business here. Your petition to join has been accepted. Grab that rig and follow me. Someone I want you to meet.
So to summarize what's happening, while the world in this game is mostly a wasteland, there are still some organizations left trying to maintain order. One of them is simply referred to as the Company, which I believe, from context clues, the main character, who is silent by the way and doesn't have a name, he tried to apply to it many years ago. But they must have held on to his resume because here they are giving me a job. Yeah, I'm not really doing much. Sure, I'll join.
You've been wanting to join the company for a long time. Your file says you made a name for yourself in the combat trials. Your reputation in the sticks doesn't mean shit to me.
I'm skipping through some dialogue, but it's literally just a mission briefing. And that actually describes a lot of the cutscenes. Just a mission briefing for the next level. For this level, we gotta destroy these transmitters or something. This area is pretty nice. More open spaces, shooting feels okay. Hey, I like the blue aesthetic. Makes the level feel like it's at dusk. But wow, looks like I already need to talk about the on-foot gameplay and everything that's wrong with it. So, the FPS gameplay. It's dated, but it is much better than the car combat. Don't get me wrong. While this game came out in '99, its gameplay feels closer to something like Doom. You have fast movement speed, ammo and health are just these glowing icons that float on the ground. It feels very arcadey. Not bad, by any means, just dated for the time. I would have expected something more ripped off of Half-Life, or Sin, or who knows, maybe even Quake, but no, this is going old school, even for '99. Combat is alright, nothing to write home about. Honestly, the coolest thing about it is the gun that you carry. Yeah, you have one gun, but instead of carrying multiple weapons, your gun just alters its firing mode. So it can be an assault rifle, a shotgun, a sniper, a rocket launcher, even a saw blade. Oh yeah, as if Mad Max wasn't enough, I'm getting some Judge Dredd vibes from this game. That is kinda dope. But yeah, the gameplay here is very clunky. It's playable. God, it's way more playable than even the driving sections, but it is very basic. Don't go expecting Quake or Half-Life levels of complexity here. Another huge thing I'm noticing, and this is likely just an engine problem, but I keep getting stuck on world geometry. Like, I'll be walking along a wall, and if I scrape against it in the wrong way, my character gets all stuck and jittery. Can you guys see this? Is this picking up on video? It's super glitchy, and I'm just guessing it's a result of how the engine was coded. So yeah, that sums up the FPS combat. Very basic, glitchy in parts, but by no means is it worse than the driving sections. So after destroying the transmitters, we are sent to another mission, blowing up a Red Sixer base. A base that happens to be shaped like a volcano. Okay. This is actually pretty unique, as our car is the bomb itself, so we have to carefully escort it to the top of the volcano, and drop it in, and boom! Okay, I'll admit, the premise behind this level is pretty fun. After that, I get sent to another Red Sixer base. This time they're held up in an abandoned airport, and they're holding on to this experimental EMP weapon. I gotta go get rid of it.
Loads and fires like a normal rocket, but if you pop one in somebody's rig, the auto-ejector overloads and spits his ass out the door. The power surge will lock the vehicle down for a few seconds. Long enough for you to get to know the driver. We don't have time to plan anything smooth. The idea is you go in, kick everybody's ass, grab the EMPs, and get the hell out. Not much of a plan, I know, but that's the way you seem to do shit anyway.
For anyone who's worked at a company like this is pretty standard. So we're off to the airport. As we're enjoying this scenery, let's take a break and talk about the developer who made this game, because they have an interesting story. Beyond Games. Now, as best as I can tell, this company only made 5 games, from 1992 until 2002, when they inevitably shut down. Also, I need to specify, I am referring to the Beyond Games that existed in the 90s, not the other studio, also called Beyond Games, that seems to still be in business, but it's located in San Francisco. Yeah, I'm not even sure what the San Francisco-based Beyond Games has even developed, since their entire website is just a single JPEG background image with contact info. However, they sure as fuck made my job of looking into the history of the other Beyond Games a whole lot harder. Thanks for that. You know how a lot of game studios famously have long-winded or weird-ass names for their companies? That is literally to prevent this kind of confusion from happening. You are never going to confuse Electro Brain Corp with any other game studio, I'll tell you that. But yeah, Beyond Games, the original Beyond Games, they've been gone for nearly 20 years, but they sure left their legacy, in more interesting ways than one. When I look at an old obscure game, I sometimes like to look at the studio that made it, see if they've made anything else, gone on to make other stuff, or maybe just see what their library consists of. If they've made one weird game, there's a good chance they've made a few. Plus, that's literally how I've stumbled upon a handful of other gems that I'm glad I discovered. Years ago, I played a tiny budget game called Clutch, and at the request of a commenter, I looked into the studio that made it. And guess what? They made another earlier game called Hard Truck Apocalypse, which has become a cult classic of mine. Definitely in my backlog of games that I'll cover at some point. So, I looked into Beyond Games just to see what other titles they developed in their brief existence. Well, all I can say was, they found their calling, and that was making car combat games. Oh yeah, Redline wasn't even the first car combat game they made, nor was it even their last. Their very first game was Battle Wheels. It was a 1993 3D car combat game released exclusively for the fucking Atari Lynx. Yeah, the Atari Lynx. This thing right here. Matter of fact, as best as I can tell, I think Redline's original development began as a spiritual sequel / port of Battle Wheels, which then turned into a much bigger game, which was also supposed to be ported to the Lynx alongside PC. But I'm guessing as the Atari Lynx was lowered into its grave, Beyond Games probably just stuck with PC. Then, after Redline in 2001, they released another car combat game, Motor Mayhem, a PS2 exclusive. Finally, their last game was Hot Wheels Velocity X, a 2002 car combat game for PS2, GameCube, and Windows. What I find hilarious is that even as the casket was being lowered into the ground, Beyond Games were still not giving up in making their perfect car combat game. Before they went under, they were working on yet another fucking car combat game, Doomsday Rescue, for the Xbox and PS2. I love how even in death, Beyond Games were dedicated to perfecting the art of the car combat genre. God damn, say what you want, but they knew exactly what kind of game they wanted to make, and they would be damned if they made anything different. I'm vaguely reminded of musician Mike Oldfield. As everyone already knows, he's the composer, songwriter, and musicianist behind the album Tubular Bells, whose opening track was used as the unofficial theme for Exorcist. Yeah, that album. Anyways, that album came out in 1973, and it was a passion project by Oldfield. He apparently only had a 4-track recorder that, after adding in his instruments, he would then bring it all down to 1 track, then add more instruments on top of it again, and he'd do that over and over until he thought it was perfect. But when he released his first album, he still wasn't satisfied with it, because since then, he's remade Tubular Bells like 4 or 5 times, using every new advancement in technology to try and perfect it even more. It's like a logarithmic curve, where we are constantly getting closer to the perfect incarnation of Tubular Bells, but we've never quite reached it yet. Only in Mike Oldfield's brain does this version of the album exist, and we are just gonna keep getting newer incarnations of it. Beyond Games kept trying to perfect their vehicle combat game the same way that Oldfield was trying to perfect Tubular Bells. Both of them were never satisfied with what they put out, and they were constantly getting closer to their vision. I've often heard the saying that art is a compromise between your vision and reality. Well, for Beyond Games, they were simply waiting for reality to catch up to them. As far as I know, there does exist a perfect post-apocalyptic car combat game, but it is locked away in the brains of the lead developers at that studio. Only they can mentally comprehend a game that amazing. And we mere mortals are limited to the chains of our physical technology in actually experiencing it, which, in the case of Redline, was the restrictions of 3D engine limitations in the late 90s. What a shame. It also sucks that they went under in 2002, because with the advancements of engine technology, disk space, graphics, who knows what kind of games they could have made in the last 20 years. There is a good chance that an alternate timeline currently has the best car combat game that exists, and will ever exist. And sadly, we are not in that timeline. Damn. Although that is still theoretical at this point. Who even knows if human hands could create such an achievement? Unfortunately, after the company's closure, a lot of the employees of Beyond Games, including its founder, would actually join another game studio, Smart Bomb Interactive. For the life of me, I can't figure out whether or not Smart Bomb was made up mostly of Beyond Games staff members, or if instead just Beyond Games was absorbed by a newly created company called Smart Bomb. I'm mostly feeling the latter, since the style of Smart Bomb seems focused on shovelware for children. Not the kind of games that the people behind Redline should be making. Although they would later change their name to Wildworks instead, as to be even more family friendly, so I think the coffin of Beyond Games has already been buried by this point. I'm the only one who remembers it. And that is the sad tale of Beyond Games. They could have made the best car combat game we've ever seen, but gosh, if only. Anyway, back to the game. The Freakway. This level is pretty standard, just kind of a giant arena where we compete with other contestants. I gotta say, the level itself, as basic as it is pretty cool. It's got a good flow to it, the atmosphere is great, Man, I love these colored lights. I don't know if this is a good comparison, but this feels kind of like a Sonic level. I don't know how else to describe it. It's very abstract, it doesn't make sense, but it's not supposed to make sense. It's this amazing, trippy, mechanical nightmare that actually looks really cool. I kind of like it. This downward ramp is pretty sweet. Anyway, there's kind of an elephant in the room that I've been ignoring this entire time. What's going on here? Like, why are we competing in a sports arena? What is going on? Well, that opens a whole new can of worms that we need to address. And to do that, we have to explain the world of Redline, because this game's setting is kinda weird. There is more to this game's world than I initially thought. You see, way back when I teased this game to my subscribers, I called this game a Mad Max-inspired FPS game with car combat. And that's true. There is a ton of influence from Mad Max, definitely the main inspiration. You got the bandits, the cars, the wasteland. I don't need to explain it to you. You can just tell by looking at the game, these developers loved Mad Max. But unlike Mad Max, there's apparently some organization out there maintaining order, or at least trying to. In the game, it's simply referred to as the Company, and they're pretty much shown to be the good guys. I mean, I don't know much about their morals or ethics or policy or even what they stand for, but they don't immediately want to kill and eat me. So already in this world, that's good enough for me. Also, the simple fact that they're called the Company hint at the idea that they are simply a privately owned military company, or something along those lines, meaning that they aren't necessarily the government, but just an entity fighting for its own goals. Does that mean there's still a government out there? If so, what happened to these crumbling cities? Where is everybody? Well, lo and behold, the game came with a manual, which actually explains the entire setting for the game. Well, it tries to. Again, this game has layers, we'll get into it. I thought that with the cover and screenshots that this would be a simple post-apocalyptic Mad Max world. But no, there is a full-blown backstory to everything. It's like 3 whole pages too. So let me paraphrase. So the moon has fallen out of orbit, and it is currently much closer to Earth than it normally is, to the point where it's fucking up the ecosystem, destroying cities, and it also made the skies red. Not exactly sure about that last part. Also, there's mention that humans caused the moon to be out of orbit. I'm not exactly sure how, but yeah, I wasn't really paying attention to that part of the manual. What's left of civilization is made up of the wealthy elite, who live in these self-sustaining biodome cities. Meanwhile, everyone else on the surface is forced to scavenge for themselves. There's also something with orgone energy, which seems to be a limitless source of energy, but it can also mutate people if left unchecked. There's more mention of a genetically engineered virus, how the dome cities created a blood sport. There's tons of dates and locations and events, and this is just too much to read. Doom 1 got away with a paragraph. Abuse got away with a few sentences. I think Redline doesn't need 3 pages. Redline needs to take a page out of other games' books by throwing away the pages. Get rid of that. Just give me a little descriptor, tell me what I'm doing, and then I'll be fine. Or just explain this in-game. This backstory is way too intricate for this type of game. It is pure drivel about 1950s experiments, the United Nations, how they convened in Singapore, the Red 6 disease. It's all too much. Just get rid of it. Throw it out. This is a game where I drive around and shoot at people, not Deus Ex. Anyway, that is the setting of the game. An apocalyptic world with pockets of human civilization living in isolated cities. So while there is definitely an influence of Mad Max, it seems that there's an equal influence of Judge Dredd. I mean, we already have the Lawgiver. What else do we need? We've got an ethically ambiguous security force, isolated megacities with an inhospitable wasteland outside, and a weird satirical tone that really doesn't take itself seriously. There is so much to this game that seems to be ripped out of the pages of 2000 AD. It's pretty insane. I mean, this is literally Judge Dredd, but if the wasteland outside of Megacity 1 consisted of Mad Max. Hell, even the way we're dressed in our high-tech blue uniforms, you cannot tell me we don't look like judges. Hell, look at this guy in the background. He even has a judge helmet too. This brings up another question. Who are we? Like, the company, I mean. The manual, with its 3 pages worth of exposition, doesn't even clear up who the company is, or what their goal is. The wasteland is apparently just run by lawless gangs. Is the company just another one of those gangs? Maybe a little more well-funded and well-armed? If so, why don't they act like a loosely organized vigilante group? Hell, why are they called the Company? They apparently have to recruit you too, since people literally have to apply to get in. Maybe the company's just a private security force paid for by what's left of civilization. You know, maybe they're just used to try and maintain order out in the wasteland. At first that kinda made sense, and it also would explain where they got all their tech, weaponry, and military hierarchy from. Although, From how the manual describes them, the people still living inside their dome cities don't even care about the people on the outside. So long as they aren't being bothered by them, the insiders do not give a shit what people on the outside do. So what good would a security force be if you're just going to encourage all the gangs to fight each other anyways? They clearly don't care about maintaining the peace. So I know that theory's wrong. The company likely isn't funded by the dome cities, because if that were the case, we'd see them getting orders from the inside. We'd see radio chatter, maybe orders down from on high, but nope, we get none of that. And actually, in the game, it's mentioned where all the other gangs get their vehicles from sponsors.
Now most of the rigs you see on the outside were built by sponsors, inside corporate yanks who wouldn't piss down our throats if our lungs were on fire. These guys dole out new weapons and technology to the gangs based on audience ratings, or sometimes on who makes the best offer.
Story-wise, this is a huge bombshell, as we now know that sponsors are directly funding and giving vehicles to the very gangs that we're fighting against, meaning that we are very likely on our own out here when it comes to funds and resources. I mean, why would someone want to fund us? Just a giant vigilante group that is trying to destroy all the rest of the gangs? So I think it's safe to say that the company is very clearly not funded by the insiders. I mean, an organization like us trying to maintain peace by neutralizing everybody else probably goes against the sponsors' wishes of letting the gangs duke it out. So again, I ask the question, who are we? How are we funded? Where do we get all this infrastructure from? If we were a ragtag vigilante group, you'd be able to see cracks and flaws, vehicles that weren't really in the best of conditions. All of our weapons, our tech, even our base would be a mix of whatever we could find. Spares, hand-me-downs, stuff that we could scavenge. You'd have tons of stuff mixed together. Old, worn-down guns with occasional high-tech weaponry. Only used for important situations though, we don't want to waste that. I mean, we'd look like the bandits. They're the ones getting sponsorship deals, not us. Yet they still have a complete random mix of old rusted vehicles and cars. They are the definition of a loosely organized gang, not us. Instead, we're all dressed in matching uniforms and armor. Hell, if we were a vigilante group, you would see way more infighting. You'd see members deserting the group, going off on their own, or just trying to betray us from the inside. Vigilanteism is sloppy. You're bound to have some unsavory characters slip through the cracks during the hiring process. Matter of fact, in one of the missions, Liddy is paranoid at the idea that someone inside the company has ulterior motives and might be a saboteur, to the point where he sends you, his lieutenant, to investigate. Although there is that one mission where you and Bork duke it out to see who gets the position of lieutenant. That also brings up a good point. As far as I can tell, we are a tiny little group, much smaller than the Red Sixers, given by just how many Red Sixers I've killed throughout the game. There's a lot. Look how small our base is. We don't have a lot of troops or manpower or even vehicles, yet we do have high-tech equipment, aircraft, state-of-the-art weapons, to the point where we're literally able to hold our own against a much larger gang. A gang, I might add, that is being given resources and vehicles from sponsors inside the Dome City. The company in Redline is a small, well-equipped task force that is basically a wrecking crew with how much ammo we have. Where are we getting it from? Who is supplying us? I mean, there's one cutscene that implies we're getting our ammo from another gang in a really sketchy trade deal in a back alley. But I mean, is that where we're getting all of our ammo from? I've shot a lot of bullets. Where else are we getting this from? Another guess that I have is that the company is one of merely many other private security forces out on the surface. Maybe there's another, much larger peacekeeping organization that's actually supplying us. Or maybe we're just kind of a conglomeration of different organizations working together to maintain the peace. It would explain how we have access to military-grade infrastructure and are able to maintain order among our ranks. It's actually a really fascinating set of factions when you think about it. So first you have the company, which, best I can tell, seems to have a vested interest in maintaining order and peace out in the wasteland, which of course puts them at odds with gangs like the Red Sixers and any other lawless gang out there trying to raid, pillage. Hell, we got cannibals out there. The company pretty much exists just to destroy any of these unsavory factions looking to cause chaos with neutral towns and settlements, like where the main character comes from. That's how I got recruited in the first place. I was out shooting at Red Sixers, defending my small neutral town in the middle of a raid. But the Red Sixers aren't alone. They have sponsors from inside the Dome cities, giving them presumably vehicles, weapons, other resources too. So in a way, there's this uneasy Cold War-esque conflict between the wealthy elite living inside their dome cities and the neutral towns living out on the surface, as well as the company itself, which is seeking to dismantle these gangs in the first place. It's a weird alignment of factions and gangs and organizations in what's basically a proxy war, which ironically itself serves the goals of the domed megacities, just to keep us fighting amongst ourselves and thereby forgetting about them entirely. This whole game, I'm just shooting at other bandits and wastelanders. Not once do we fight directly against the insiders, so their plan is probably working. And you know what? This idea is pretty fascinating. If the developers were so focused on story, they should have showcased this. Instead of a bunch of mindless, go here, destroy thing, press a button missions, we need more of this. Show us this world. Show us the insiders. Have a mission set in one of the domed cities. Do more world building. This is fascinating stuff. This could work for a much better game. But no, a lot of it was squandered. It's just a simple post-apocalyptic game that I'm pretty sure if you skip the cutscenes, you probably won't even get the idea that there's a huge world outside of these levels. That right there is called wasted potential. Anyways, that's my rant on this game's world. And speaking of, after moving into our new base, we get sent on some more missions. Oh boy. One involves us going into an abandoned city to find an item that can help negate the negative effects of Oregon energy. It's also in the middle of Templar territory, and we have no idea if they'll trade it with the Red Sixers or some other gang, so we gotta take it from them. Better safe than sorry.
The Templars are unpredictable. There's no telling what they do. They might deal the serums to the Sixers or another gang, and they might not even know what the hell they are. All I know is that if those serums exist, they're the most valuable thing on the outside.
It actually starts off pretty generic, just kind of empty city roads with vehicle combat, but eventually you go down into the subway and it actually gets a lot better. Again, I feel like the on-foot sections of Redline are ironically the best part about it. Maybe it's just because the driving sections control like ass, I don't know. You eventually get back onto the surface, then you end up in a weird cult-like temple.
I don't know about you, but this place gives me the creeps.
You said it. This level really makes me feel deep inside this game's world. I specifically felt that feeling once I saw the four-armed statue. That's when I knew I wasn't in Kansas anymore. The mission after is pretty hilarious. After a deal with a really sketchy looking gang, the main character gets locked inside his car with a bomb set to detonate in 5 minutes. Yeah, good job there, pal. While the timer is ticking down, I feel I need to bring up something else that you may have noticed, and I mentioned it earlier. Frame rate. That's right. Redline is locked to 30 FPS. Ugh. For the life of me, I'm never gonna understand why developers tie their game speed to frame rate. You would have thought that in 1999, developers should have known better, that computers were eventually gonna get faster, and that locking a game to 30 wasn't the best way to prepare for that. Also, as far as I can tell, there is no way to uncap this game's frame rate. Or if there is, no one in 22 years has found out how. I mean, that could be possible. Barely anyone knows about this game. And like I said before, it has a few frame rate oddities. The main menu is borderline unusable with how low the frame rate drops. I have no fucking clue why this happens either. It's just an oddity, a quirk. So yeah, the game is stuck at 30 FPS and so is the video. Great. I guess I could technically use one of those AI interpolators that can increase a video's frame rate to 60, but I feel like that would just make it look too weird. So I'll leave it as is. 30 FPS. I know some people don't mind it, but I can't stand a frame rate this low. Even with games that I like, 30 FPS is a major drawback, huge enough to affect my entire opinion on said game. It's just so clunky to play. You really lose that smoothness you get with anything 60 or over. I've long since passed the limits of 60 FPS, and I am currently experiencing the wonders that is 144Hz gaming. And I must say, I have no intention in going back. Some people seem to be under the impression that you can't tell the difference above 60, but let me dispel that myth because it's 100% false. You can absolutely see a difference at 144 FPS. And after experiencing games at more than double the regular frame rate of 60, it's actually kind of hard going back to games that have a frame rate cap. Now luckily, frame rate is the only compatibility problem Redline has. I'm lucky to have found a fan patch for this game that not only adds in widescreen support, but also a customizable FOV. And you know what? I'll take a shitty frame rate any day over a locked FOV. One is annoying, the other genuinely gives me headaches. I'll have a link to that in the description. And back to the game. Turns out our base actually used to be none other than Area 51. Apparently much of the base actually exists underground and it's currently causing problems. They think there are some mutants down there, but they aren't sure, and normally company policy would be just to leave them alone. I mean, why would we even want to go down there? Just stay away from them. But another gang were sneaking onto our turf, and they managed to take over the entrance tunnel. That happens to the best of us. Let a problem simmer, and it just gets even worse. I also think we have a policy against loiterers, so we gotta deal with them. Company problems, am I right?
I want you and Dean to go and cap these perimeter guards and find a way down there and find out what the hell's going on.
Wow, this battle is pretty impressive for 99. I will say, as dated as the game's graphics are, even when it was released, I'm actually kind of shocked at how large these areas are. That is quite the draw distance. Anyway, once again, we have a standout level where every 10 to 15 minutes it completely flips the script. At first, it's a simple car combat level. Huge arenas, big open environments, awesome Mad Max action. Then you hop out of your vehicle and it turns back into some more fun run and gun, where you're going through this mechanical base, shooting at bad guys standing at control panels. But then, out of nowhere, you end up in these creepy tunnels, where the game all of a sudden turns into a horror game, as you fight off these creepy mutants. What the hell? This level definitely highlights how the developers are really throwing everything at the wall. And most levels in the game are like this. There are these little mini journeys where you go through these different environments and you have no idea where the roller coaster ride is going to take you. This is also helped by the game's visuals. Oh yeah, we're talking about graphics. Redline was a pretty typical FPS for 99. Low poly models, low res texture work, and levels that are a little barren and empty. I wouldn't call the graphics amazing, even for the time. One thing that really sticks out to me is just how empty and flat a lot of the areas feel. Like when you're in a corridor or a hallway, it just feels flat, there's no detail, it's very basic stuff. However, when you understand the scale of the game and the scale of these levels, it becomes pretty understandable, especially knowing how primitive the tech was at the time. I can't think of many other games doing quite what Redline was doing at the time, making a seamless interactable world that let you explore it on foot and in a car. That would have been a daunting task for any developer, much less Beyond Games. I mean, look at a game like Half-Life. It came out a year earlier, had very comparable graphics, but Half-Life 1's levels are small corridors and very limited open spaces, all tied together between loading screens. It's a tightly crafted facade, and that's why it looks really nice. Redline, on the other hand, cannot afford that. They need their levels to be vast and open since you're going to be driving across most of them. That is not an easy feat, and considering what was pulled off, I gotta say I'm a little impressed, which is kind of why I give the graphics a pass. They're very simplistic, kind of ugly in some areas, but when you consider what they were trying to pull off, it seems a little more realistic. I think this is the hard limit of what games in 99 were trying to pull off, at least with games that use polygons. I put that qualifier in there because I know I'm going to get a bunch of people in the comments rushing to say, but Andy, Delta Force 1 and 2, released in 98 and 99, were much larger than Redline. Those games are huge. And I 100% agree with you. However, those games ran on voxel engines, which was a much easier way of generating massive 3D environments. Hell, the Comanche series came out in the early 90s and they already had voxel engine technology. They were the ones pioneering large open environments. I'll be honest, I don't quite understand what voxel-based engines are, aside from the fact that they use 3D points of actual data to generate terrain, where you compare it to polygon engines, they just use triangles to create 2D meshes, which then create 3D models. In an earlier video, I tried to explain voxels, then some commenter who said he knew way more about voxels said that I was completely wrong. So now I'm back to not knowing. At least, I don't know if I was right the first time. That guy could have lied, I don't know. All you really need to know is that 99.999% of all video games, even modern ones, use polygons. Voxel engines are apparently good for destructible environments and not much else. They have this uncanny look to them. I think they look cool. And hey, if you want to check out a game that does use voxels, check out my old Czar review. That's what a voxel engine game from the late 90s looks like. It's an older video and its quality is a little questionable, especially with my younger high-pitched voice, but it's kind of charming. Czar was a fun cult classic that I discovered. If you want to listen to a nerdy 18-year-old me from 4 years ago, you can go watch that. I will say, if you do go back and watch it, compare that game's graphics to Redline. Redline has equally large environments, but it uses polygons to generate them. Anyways, for a game that actually uses polygons, Redline, especially compared to a game like Czar, is pretty impressive. My compliments towards the graphics do not just end there. I mentioned that a lot of the game is pretty empty, But that isn't always the case. There are quite a few areas that have just the right amount of details to make the environments feel a little more authentic. Something as simple as filling in a road with telephone poles, streetlights, decaying billboards, and strung up corpses does a lot to make you feel like you're actually driving down an American road. Other times you have a handful of levels that really stick out for having surprisingly detailed geometry and art design. The one thing I took away from this game was its color choice. Levels vary in color and tone, and it feels surprisingly well done. One level will have a dark blue sky at dusk, illuminated by orange lampposts and burning rubble. Other levels will give you a sky with a surreal yellow-green overcast color. Honestly, this game kind of feels like a comic book. The art style is great. Also, I have to point this out, way too many areas in this game reminded me of Escape from New York. You have these huge abandoned city blocks and streets with lit streetlights spanning far into the distance, just to further emphasize how abandoned everything is. It's a decent aesthetic. That's how I describe the art style and visuals in Redline. Very dated, very simplistic, but with a few standout areas. The next mission has a really cool build-up.
Patrols are calling in all over the map to say the Sixers are starting to form up. I think we've got a few hours before this place is shitty with Sixer rigs, which means we gotta make some plans.
Apparently, we are well aware that the Red Sixers are coming for us, and we gotta prep ourselves for a massive ambush at our base. Man, this is really cool. You can sense that something big is coming. While everyone else is preparing defenses, I'm tasked with taking out a power plant that the Red Sixers took over. Apparently, the plant was really well defended too. So the fact that the Sixers are now in control of it shows that they are willing to throw plenty of bodies against the fort until it capitulates, which is a bad sign for us.
I need you to find a way to take that power plant offline and try and save your strength. You don't want to miss the party back here, do you?
This level is just kind of more of the same. The exterior is actually really great. We have this pretty rad yellow desert wasteland with these huge coolant towers in the distance. Again, check out that draw distance. Once you're inside, there's more tech corridors with blue and red lights. Visually, it's nice. Not quite the vibes we were getting earlier. Eventually, I go through some more tunnels and you get to the top. Hey, I like this. This is what I want to see. What a view. It ends on a kind of funny note where you gotta get in this turret and shoot at the other tower. I guess that's how you end the level. We're approaching the end of the game fast. I'm already on the last couple levels, but I'd be sad if I didn't mention the music. Oh yeah, you were wondering when I was gonna bring this up. It is awesome. 90s FPS games and good rock music are like peanut butter and jelly. Redline in particular has a really fun rock soundtrack that was so good I've actually used it in other videos. Hey, anyone remember the time I made a retrospective on that game Clutch? Well, that game was severely lacking in the music department. So I decided to spice things up with borrowing Redline's tunes. Best decision I ever made. That saved that video, in my opinion. But yeah, the music is great. It has the problem of looping over each level and the audio isn't quite mixed correctly. Even still, the tracks in this game are awesome. Alright, back to the game. And this time we're almost done with it. I've been glossing over a few plot points, but basically every mission in this game is a gang is doing a thing and you gotta stop them from doing it. Rinse and repeat until the final level. The last level is a neat twist, as instead of going on the offensive, it's the Red Sixers who are sieging us. So we gotta defend against them. Also, look at this cutscene for a sec, and see how my character gets introduced. Hell yeah! So this part isn't too bad, just a lame turret section. I was actually expecting it to be god-awful, but nah, it's hilariously easy. Just keep shooting the cars and don't stop until the mission's over. That's pretty much it. Eventually, when they're all defeated, I get a call that Liddy is down. Oh gee, I wonder who could possibly be responsible.
Seems like every time I run into you, I gotta eat a bunch of your friends. We got a lot of Sixers here who want a little piece of you. There wasn't enough Liddy to go around.
Man, props to the VA. This final fight is pretty bad. You have a giant open pit with infinite respawning enemies while I have to kill this tank. Killing this guy took a ton of trial and error with a lot of cheesing, because the enemies have a hard time altering their aim if you're on a hill that they can't reach. Yeah, this whole part is a nightmare. The only safe strategy, from what I can tell, is to try and drive around him in circles, maybe shoot at him with your side guns, but mostly use up all of your mines. That's the name of the game. Drive away from him, set up mines, get him to blow himself up. If you back up far enough, you can kind of get your lock-on rockets to hit them, except once other enemies spawn in, your target reticle will just lock onto them instead. And as far as I can tell, there's no way to change who you're locked onto. So you'll be wasting most of your ammo killing the other enemies just to finally shoot at the main boss. But by the time you're able to shoot at the main boss, more enemies have respawned. Also, it'll take so long to kill the other enemies that your position is already compromised, forcing you to relocate, giving the game more time to respawn everybody else, and more time for all the enemies to do damage to you. Driving around him in circles is easier, because it speeds up the boss battle immensely. Once again, it's hard to see if my side guns are even hitting him, but there's no other way to do it. God, this is actual hell. Anyways, skipping some more, I finally killed the Red Sixers boss. Fucking finally. Sorry, I kinda like that guy, but he was a cannibal. What else can you do? Shit, we get an actual epilogue.
Now we've got some new gang up north making noise.
Jesus, every cutscene in this game is a friggin' mission briefing, huh? At the end of the cutscene, I'm literally getting briefed on a mission that I'm not gonna play, and instead it's just hinting at what I think might be a potential sequel? I don't know, but it's all worth it, because in the end, we got ourselves a nice hood ornament. Damn straight. Redline! What can I say? It's a video game. To me, this exemplifies what I love about these obscure, mostly forgotten FPS games from years past. They have a ton of soul and charm. They have a lot of weirdness, and they are almost always plagued by crippling problems, either in regards to engine limitations or level design. You wouldn't get a game like Redline these days, but back in the 90s, all bets were off. And that's kind of what's charming about this game. It has a ton of problems, a lot of bugs, definitely unbalanced gameplay, but it's got a lot of heart. So, would I recommend this game to anybody? Probably not. Do not mistake my words. This is not a cult classic, like many other FPS games I've covered. Instead, this is a tiny game made by a tiny developer who put their blood and sweat into it, and it is flawed on every level. If this game were a movie, it wouldn't be a low-budget cult classic. This would be a B-movie through and through. So no, I would not recommend this game to people looking for a hidden gem. But those who want a unique post-apocalyptic driving game with FPS gameplay, you could probably look better elsewhere. However, I do consider this a rite of passage for people whose main hobbies are collecting weird, obscure FPS games. If you've played Redline, you've probably played them all. It's unfortunate because even though it's plagued by bugs, issues, bad level design, it's clear a lot of work went into this. I can tell. You don't just create this much exposition for a game that you're just going to release as shovelware. There was effort in making this game. The repetitious mission structure got old after a while, yet I was still pretty interested in the game's setting. Who were the Templars? Who were the mutants? What was really hidden under Area 51? Where are those famous domed cities, and what are the true goals of the Insiders? Hell, what was the goal of the company? It seems these days that they're making remakes and remasters of just any old game they can get their hands on. It's almost eye-rolling when you see that yet another game is being remastered with brand new graphics and updated gameplay. That in itself has become a meme. But this game in particular is one that would truly benefit from a proper remake from the ground up. You maintain the same elements, but you do a complete rework. I've often heard that James Cameron made Terminator 2 as basically just a bigger budget version of Terminator 1. He just wanted it to have better effects, better pacing, and a more polished script. Well, I want the same for Redline. Redline is a silly B-movie that has the elements for a really fun FPS game. Car combat, huge open levels, surprisingly solid combat that is merely held back by the controls. It has some weird quirks that prevent it from being a genuine classic. I think a rebalance of this game could get it very close to something good. I unironically think Redline could be a genuine cult classic if you improve the controls, fix some engine bugs, with collision data, up the frame rate and game speed, and improve the AI to allow for enemies that don't require you to cheese them. Honestly, with those simple tweaks, this game could be a lot better. Currently, Night Dive is the one distributing this game, and the game is completely untouched. Nothing has been updated for this game, and you can tell. I'm very curious to see how a proper remastered Redline could look. Night Dive has done a ton of remasters, but they need to step in and give Redline the love it deserves. Although nobody plays this game, much less owns it, so that's definitely never gonna happen. Well, Redline will be forgotten. Anyway, that's the video. I got nothing else to add. If you want to play it for yourselves, God have mercy on you if you do. But if you want to, You can buy it from Steam for $6.99, or from GOG for $5.99. Yeah, I guess the GOG version is cheaper by $1. What a steal. Anyway, this was the game that you guys wanted to see the most when I pulled it. So it looks like the next one down my list is a giant open world racing game that's not as old as Redline. Otherwise, you all have a good one. I will see you again next time.